What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are covering the story Godzilla versus Hulk. Now, this is a series, or at least one of a series of one-shot comics that involve Godzilla and other Marvel characters. Right now, Godzilla's destroying the Marvel Universe, right? That series is still going. We haven't quite started it yet, but we can, if you guys are interested. We're only a couple issues in. They're all kind of disconnected, though, these one-shot comics, right? So they don't really cross over from one to the other. But what this one does is it initially picks up with Bruce Banner down in Thunderbolt Ranch. The idea that Thunderbolt Ranch is kind of this underground cavern. Now, one of the things to know about Godzilla at this point in time is, number one, we just kind of assume he's here, that this comic sort of takes place in what we would consider to be the Incredible Hulk stories in the 1970s. Number two, while all the superheroes on Earth aren't necessarily dead because of Godzilla, some of them are, and you guys will see what I'm talking about as we get further through this. And the third is that we pick up with Bruce Banner meeting with Dr. Demonicus. Now, Dr. Demonicus is Douglas Byerly. And here's a funny thing about Dr. Demonicus. He originally appeared not as a Marvel Comics character, at least not in the traditional way that you think. He actually appeared in the old Godzilla comics from Marvel Comics way back in the day. So technically he's a Godzilla character. But the fact is, he doesn't really have any abilities per se, right? He's just a guy with genius level intellect. Now, one of the things we learn between the conversation that he has with Bruce Banner is that basically Demonicus has been working on something called the Kaiju Incinerator, which we can largely just consider to be the oxygen destroyer. It's kind of what you could call it from the Godzilla mythos. If you don't know what that means, it's basically the Grand Poobah weapon that can kill Godzilla. And in fact, it did in the original Godzilla film. But the point is that he's basically been developing this thing in order to destroy Godzilla, because Godzilla's been traveling around and basically taking everybody else out. But there's a kind of plan, right? So we're sort of picking up in the middle of this Godzilla crisis that's going on out there. The other thing that we end up learning is that when it comes to Thunderbolt Ross, in this particular reality, he's not just a general who did some stuff and became Red Hulk once. Instead, he's talking to a reporter, and the reporter asked the question, right? You killed Fang Foom, Hulk, Surtur, and so many others, but not Godzilla. How do you intend to do it? Now, I know you guys are kind of like, well, I mean, where do we get Godzilla versus Hulk if he killed Hulk? You guys will see what I'm talking about here in a second. And so, of course, the response of Thunderbolt here is like, this is Texas, son. Bagging big game requires some big bait. And it just so happens we have an ace up our sleeve. Because what we end up doing is picking up with Mothra being attacked by Kumonga, right? Any of you guys who saw the old Son of Godzilla movie from back in the day, Kumonga is just like a giant spider, right? Just one of the many monsters that exist out there. Now, the thing about this is that Mothra and Godzilla kind of have a thing, right? Camaraderie, maybe some kind of weird monster romantic connection for all the gooners out there. Whatever the case happens to be, right? Like, they've got some kind of connection between the two of them. I'm not versed enough in the Godzilla lore to know how deep it goes, but it's one of these things where between the Godzilla mythos and even what's happening in the story, they're like, if we attack Mothra, Godzilla will respond, like he will show up. And so it's not enough that like Kumonga has Mothra just ensnared in all this webbing. He spits acid in her eye like a dick. And so at that point, Godzilla is more incensed than before. But the other thing about this is that Kumonga's not doing it of its own volition. Kumonga's actually being controlled. Specifically, it's being controlled by Dr. Demonicus. And that's where Banner's like, look, man, I object to this, right? Like, surely there was a less cruel plot to lure Godzilla here. And that's where you kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what's going on, specifically with regards to the Hulk. Because the response of Demonicus kind of says everything, right? All these abominations must be cleansed. My control of Kumonga may not last long, but the cries of Mothra will be too much for Godzilla to resist. They have showed some camaraderie in the past. And that's where Banner asks, what happens when Godzilla is off the board? What will you do then? And that's where Demonicus just says, look at me and look at what this war has cost me. My body has been desecrated in this fight. I am hollowed out from within. These kaiju have utterly destroyed me. Be grateful, Dr. Banner, that you have no idea what it's like to be a monster. Now, here's the thing that kind of gets glossed over in a little bit of the discussion later on, but specifically if you kind of read between the lines, the long and short of it is that everyone believes that Hulk is dead. And in fact, the Incredible Hulk was quote-unquote buried. The reality of what actually went on there is that there came a point in this particular universe, which I'm not aware that we actually get an on-panel depiction of it, but there came a point when Bruce Banner had basically transformed Rick Jones into the Hulk, which Thunderbolt Ross went after. Thunderbolt Ross successfully killed the quote-unquote Hulk and buried him, none the wiser to the fact that the real Hulk is Bruce Banner. Now, your mileage may vary on how you feel about Rick Jones being killed and everybody being tricked into thinking he's the Hulk, but the fact is, that's what happens. And so picking up in this moment right now, right, we're told Dr. Demonicus's plan worked exactly like the mad scientists hoped. The anguished cries of Mothra summoned Godzilla to San Antonio. Not only that, unlike a lot of the characters that we're traditionally used to, guys like Samuel Stearns, for example, the leader, not the garbage one we saw in the movie, but like the cool one from the comics, he's not really that guy. Instead, he's just a pilot, right? And like literally Thunderbolt Ross calls out, right? Stearns is down. Repeat, call sign leader is down. Send medics to that guy. Not only that, Doc Samson is not Doc Samson, right? He's not a psychiatrist or therapist who was exposed to gamma radiation and became part of the Hulk family. He's just another pilot here, right? So again, a lot of these roles are shifted around and changed, but Thunderbolt Ross just tells him, right? Like, get the civilian clear and get me to the barn. I have to get my Bronco. Now, of course, a lot of this is written in a really campy way, and that makes it amazing, right? Because at that point, he just like jumps out of the helicopter and parachutes down and just says, Banner, meet me in the barn. Now, here's a cool thing that we also learn about Thunderbolt Ross, right? That Ross had fought in wars for almost his entire life. Most of them filled history books. Some were secret, but the war to end the kaiju threat was his most difficult charge. He sent many men to their deaths, but he was always willing to pay the ultimate price. And that's why he's always led the battle from the front lines. Today's climactic battle with Godzilla would be no different. And so when he ends up landing in basically the barn, there's a kind of conversation, right, between all of them, right, where Banner basically checks in and is like, all my lights are green, right? Thunderbolt Ross is like, I'm good to go. And so Demonicus just says, Thunderbolt 1 and 2, you're clear to engage Godzilla. Be wary. It's highly likely the giant lizard has some affinity for Mothra and will be angry at her mistreatment by Kumonga. And then in turn, they launch, only for us to find out that what Thunderbolt Ross had been building were basically Mechagodzillas, which is pretty amazing, right? The fact that like Thunderbolt Ross is building those, and in fact, we're told that the rebuilt Mechagodzillas should be more than enough, and the performance of these machines has been vastly improved by Tony Stark, and no longer do we need to remote pilot them. May Stark rest in peace. Godzilla may have crushed him, but perhaps his genius intellect will help us finally be rid of this scaly curse. And it doesn't work, because as soon as they fly overhead, Bruce Banner gets shot in the face, right? Like his Mechagodzilla basically gets blown down by atomic breath, so he goes crashing into the ground. Thunderbolt Ross responds by firing rockets out of the mouth of his Mechagodzilla, and it knocks Godzilla down. And then in turn, you get like one of the hardest lines that I think I've ever heard from basically a nobody villain, right? That like Dr. Demonicus, when one of the guys is just like, oh my God, we're gonna die here, right? Because like Godzilla comes crashing down on the ground over top of their base. There's like stones and everything falling, and it feels like the place is gonna implode. The response to Demonicus is, perhaps we'll all die today, but we're dragging Godzilla to hell with us, redirecting Kumonga to attack. It's pretty dope, right? It's a pretty awesome line, even if this guy does kind of suck. And so at this point, you got 3-on-1, right? You got the two Mechagodzillas, although Bruce Banner is kind of down, and then you've got Kumonga who's going and attacking Godzilla. Now, of course, this does kind of give them the upper hand, if only momentarily, but it doesn't make any real difference. Because at that point, Godzilla ends up knocking Thunderbolt Ross into Kumonga, and then Godzilla, of course, tears out of these steel spider webs that Kumonga throws out there, and then immediately one of the Mechagodzilla's arms just start getting ripped off by Godzilla, right? So this dude is pulling no punches, and they clearly underestimated what this guy's capable of. Bruce Banner's still out of commission, right? And that's where you literally have Thunderbolt Ross with his arms torn off, being blasted by atomic breath, who's just like, Demonicus, do something, right? This monster has taken out both of our Broncos. You said that you had a failsafe, and it's time to empty the gun, Doc. And that's where Demonicus is like, yes, of course, the failsafe, the thing that I told you was going to be used to basically end this entire threat. He's like, well, here's the thing, right? It's time for me to pay everyone back. The monsters and the men who have brought me to ruin. I have waited a long time to gather all my enemies in one place. We've been hunting kaiju for a long time. Godzilla cannot be controlled. But if I told you how I plan to kill him, you would have never let me. And so he says, I have been slowly breaking down the bodies of the monsters in my incinerator, but I've also been creating life. It is a new monster, one that will cull the kaiju forever. And rather than a distant war for dominance, we will simply have one single dominant ruler. And that's where Thunderbolt Ross is like, what are you talking about, right? And that's where Banner figures it out. And he's like, oh my God, right? Like, he didn't build a kaiju sarcophagus, it's an egg, and it's hatching. And Demonicus says, do you remember what price you said you would pay to kill Godzilla, Ross? You said the magic word, anything. Well, gentlemen, meet anything, which is Hedorah. I know a lot of you guys probably thought it was Venom. It's Hedorah, right? Now, here's a funny thing. It basically is Venom, right, in this particular story. But Hedorah, historically speaking, is just like a sludge monster, right? Like a pollution monster. But that's not really the case here, right? It's just an amorphous blob of everything. Because Demonicus says, I spliced the most deadly and robust traits of all the kaiju we've slain, from Fang Foom all the way down to the most recent one. Death will be our salvation. Hedorah will be a scourge, but he will be the only one. I will have restored balance to the planet. My creation will be more than enough to take down the so-called king of the monsters. And like literally no one can get out, because in this moment, the fight between both Godzilla and Hedorah is pretty intense. Godzilla gets knocked into Bruce Banner's Mechagodzilla, right? And in that moment, reality starts to set in. Because Banner just says, systems offline, I'm trapped, the monsters are crushing the hull, I want to live. And in that moment, the Incredible Hulk manifests, right? And comes bolting out of this Mechagodzilla, right? Hulk hates robots, Hulk hates bugs, but Hulk hates slime monsters most of all, and immediately just starts trying to attack this thing as best he can. Now, the big question everybody has is that if the Incredible Hulk is dead, how in the world is he here? But for the most part, there's no real time to worry about any of that because they've got far more pressing matters on their hand. The irony about all of this is that the Incredible Hulk actually rescues Thunderbolt Ross, given all the animosity they have, and that Thunderbolt Ross went so far as to kill him and demonstrated to Banner that he would kill the Hulk if given the opportunity. The fact that Hulk saves him is kind of amazing. Now, of course, the Incredible Hulk takes time to taunt this, right? And just kind of be like, the Incredible Hulk is laughing at you, Thunderbolt Ross. Like, imagine if that time ever came when I would save your life. Now, of course, he also answers the question of Thunderbolt Ross of how he's here if he's supposed to be dead. And again, that's kind of the gloss over statement that he used Rick Jones as his patsy. So basically, he tricked everybody into thinking that Rick Jones was the Hulk, and then he just jumps back, right, and says, Hulk smash monster. Now, here's the crazy thing about this, right? Hulk tries to fight Hedorah, but the way this is written is really cool, right? It says, perhaps Dr. Demonicus Demon would have succeeded. The sludge monster penetrated deep through the soft spot in Godzilla's armor, its eyes. Dr. Demonicus Monster was dissolving Godzilla faster than it could heal. The optic nerves were the first to go, and the sludge monster pushed towards Godzilla's brain. Now, of course, that's where the Hulk steps up, and that's where the Hulk goes to punch him. But as soon as he hits him, his hand catches on fire, and that's where Demonicus says, you small-minded dolt. You can't fight Hedorah. He's the perfect creation, a child of my superior intellect, and the DNA of hundreds of monsters slain by the Thunderbolts. Can you hear me through what's left of the Mechagodzilla's Hulk? I want you to know that soon you'll be as dead as Godzilla and all the rest. So again, just written, it's kind of a campy thing, but it is amazing. I love this. But that's the funny thing here, right? It's because Godzilla's kind of down for the count, right? Godzilla's seemingly out. And so the Incredible Hulk does the only thing he can think of, right? You all say Hulk is a monster, but am wrong. Maybe your dumb mouth was wrong about Godzilla too. Hulk saw Banner tickle Heart with electricity once. Now Dr. Hulk save Godzilla. So he literally just brings him back with an electric jolt, and he just like cuts himself, right? And it says, Hulk's blood, help lizard. And here's a funny thing, right? It says, grab your reins tight, dear reader. The eyes on Godzilla are now gamma green. Hedorah had the advantage in every way, especially size, but not anymore. Now it's Godzilla's turn to smash. Godzilla becomes the Hulk. That's basically what happens. Godzilla becomes the Incredible Hulk, and it's one of the dopest things I've ever seen. Technically, he hulks out, but you guys get it, right? Like, Godzilla hulks out. It's phenomenal, right? It's an absolutely amazing moment. But here's the funny thing about this, right? This fight between Godzilla and Hedorah ends like that, because you basically have all the abilities of Godzilla that have literally been amplified by all the powers of the Hulk. So number one, he just punches this thing, right? This sludge monster, and just sends it flying. Then he hits it with atomic breath. Is it even atomic breath at this point? Leave me a comment down below and let me know. Is it atomic breath or is it gamma breath? Or is it atomic gamma irradiated breath? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. I'm curious, right? And then it says, the fury of Godzilla burned with the anger of the Incredible Hulk. And now, in a single powerful blow, Hedorah was no more. And that's a funny thing, right? That's when Demonicus was like, I was so close. I was so close. And like what's left of Hedorah just kind of comes crashing down in the facility and basically incinerates Demonicus as soon as it touches him, right? And so at that point, with Godzilla just kind of standing there and the Hulk staring him down, right? Hulk says, Hulk knows pain of humans using Hulk. Hulk, free big dumb spider. Hulk is strongest one there is, but Hulk, no want to prove that today. And like literally Godzilla passes out. We never get to see him fight. We never see Hulk and Godzilla fight. So much for being called the Incredible Hulk versus Godzilla, right? Or Godzilla versus Hulk, right? Marvel lied to us. Marvel Comics and Jerry Dugan just clickbaited everybody in real time. That sucks, right? But it is still cool because, of course, Godzilla just sort of walks off while Bruce Banner just turns back into his regular human form. Now, in that moment, of course, Thunderbolt Ross is like, so, you fingered that poor kid as the Hulk and then let us kill him. Give me one good reason not to pull this trigger, Banner. And that's the funny thing. It's because Banner's like, look, I mean, I just saved Godzilla's life. The dude owes me a solid. So unless you want to die, you should probably put that gun away. Because if you shoot me, you're going to piss Godzilla off. Then he's going to kill you and probably just destroy everybody that you know and love, if for no other reason than just inconveniencing him, right? Because Godzilla is a boss, even though we all know he would lose to the Incredible Hulk, and that's not even a debate. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It was a fun little story. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.